Hello Year 3 and Year 4, hope you're all keeping well and welcome to this week's assembly, which is all about the topic of democracy. So in today's assembly, we're going to be looking at what democracy is, what it looks like in our country, and also what might happen if we didn't have democracy, because it is a really important feature of our society. So I am going to share a short presentation with you. There we go. Okay, so we're going to be answering the question, what is democracy? So democracy is a form of government, and it comes from the Greek phrase meaning rule by the people, which means that everybody has a say in who leads them. So everybody has an equal chance to have a say in who is going to lead and run the country on our behalf. So why do we need democracy? Democracy means that everybody gets a say and everybody has a right to choose who runs and who leads the country. Well, firstly, it allows people a way of choosing and replacing their representatives, so people who stand in on their behalf, through free and fair elections, meaning you don't have to pay, you don't have to have any sort of special criteria to be able to vote, and you should be able to vote with as much chance as anybody else. Just as we looked at last week, it also means that it protects the human rights of all citizens. If we didn't have democracy, we wouldn't have equality, and therefore our human rights would be compromised. It depends on laws which apply equally to all citizens, so we all follow the rule of law to make sure that we live safely and in harmony with one another. And it also encourages citizens to participate in politics and community life. If we didn't have democracy, then people wouldn't have much of a say in how things were run, and therefore there might be a lot of problems along the way with people not being happy with how things have turned out and perhaps not having as much say as they should. So, how do we choose those who run our country? So people form small groups which we call political parties. And each of those groups will hold similar beliefs and ideas on how the country should be run. Each group will be slightly different from one another. People from these groups will stand for leadership, meaning they want to be in charge of their party and ultimately of the country. And so when they make a decision to lead their party or to stand for leadership, they will campaign. So they will have lots of discussions and answer lots of questions from people about the changes that they would make should they become leader. Here is just a little reminder of the main political parties and their leaders in the UK today. So firstly, we have got Mr. Boris Johnson, a very familiar face to us because he is currently our Prime Minister and he is the leader of the Conservative Party. Then we have Sir Keir Starmer, who is the head of the opposition party, which is the Labour Party. We then have in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, who is the leader of the SNP. And we have Sir Ed Davey, who is head of the Liberal Democrat Party. So once we have our political parties, and each of those parties has their own candidates to stand for election to be head of their party, we then as citizens, so people like me and you living in the community, listen to their views of those different parties and make our decision on who we would like to support. And in doing this, we cast a ballot for our candidate, which means quite simply, we have a list of names, we put a cross next to the name of the person we would like to run the country or stand for leadership of that party, and we pop it into the ballot box, just like in that picture there. Now, this might look familiar from the television. It will certainly look familiar to lots of the adults, but this is how we vote. So we go into a ballot box, which is hidden in a secret booth, so no one can see who we are voting for. So really important that we have a secret ballot and that our decision on who we vote for is not swayed by anybody else's opinions. We have the right to choose whoever we like. And at the end of the election day, so the day when everybody votes, all those votes are counted. It takes a very long time and it takes a lot of people, and those votes are added up. And the candidate with the majority of votes, so the most votes, is declared the winner, and that political party will therefore be voted in to run the country. But that's just where the work starts, because now we have our elected representatives. So elected means voted. So we have our leader, and once they are in power, they have to listen to other people's suggestions and ideas, particularly those of the people in the country or the community that they are in charge of. And this is really important because if they don't do a good enough job, they can also be replaced in the next election. They can be voted out and somebody else receiving the majority of votes. Okay, so now that we have a look, now that we've had a look at democracy and what it looks like in terms of how we vote, now we're going to have a look at how it looks in the UK at the moment. So we have got three different features of the government. We have House of Lords, the House of Commons, and the monarch. And what I'm going to do is share my screen with you again. And this time we're going to watch a short video which is going to explain to us what that looks like.
You've probably heard of the government. The government's job is to run the country. Parliament's job is to check and challenge what the government does. Let's take a closer look at what happens in Parliament today. Parliament is made up of three parts: the House of Commons, the House of Lords, and the King or Queen, known as the monarch. The House of Commons chamber is where important topics are debated, laws are discussed, and where members of Parliament, MPs, can keep an eye on the work of the government. There are 650 MPs, and each one represents an area of the United Kingdom. These areas are called constituencies. Most MPs belong to a political party, which is a group of people with similar views on how the country should be run. And some MPs are independent, which means they aren't part of any party. MPs are voted for by the people in their constituency at general elections. The leader of the party that wins the election becomes the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister and their party run the country and are called the government. Parties not in power are known as the opposition, and they take a leading role in checking and challenging the ideas of government through debates in the chamber. At the head of the House sits the Speaker. It's their job to make sure debates are kept in order. Sometimes they can get very lively. The second part of Parliament is the House of Lords, and it shares the job of making laws with the House of Commons. There are around 800 members, and most are life peers. Life peers are chosen for their knowledge and experience, so they can use their special skills to look carefully at new laws. Anyone, including you, can nominate somebody to be a life peer. Successful nominations are then recommended by the Prime Minister and approved by the monarch. Once approved, you become a lord if you're a man, or a baroness if you're a woman, and you are then a member of the House of Lords, a peer for the rest of your life. In the House of Lords, there is also a small group of hereditary peers who have had their position passed on to them by their family, and some bishops. The third part of Parliament is the monarch. This role is mainly ceremonial these days. They meet the Prime Minister once a week to hear what's going on in Parliament and sign every new law.
Okay, so hopefully that was a simple introduction to what the government looks like in the UK. Okay, so back to our presentation. Now that we know what the government looks like, we're going to have a look at what would happen if we didn't have democracy. So without law, without having the right to vote for people to lead the country and for them to have the opportunity to listen to our ideas and put laws in place, people would be able to do whatever they wanted. And unfortunately, that might lead people to making negative decisions or making the wrong choices, which could negatively impact others. So laws protect our rights, which remember we looked at last week with Ms. Turley, and ensure that we carry out our responsibilities. They give us really good guidelines on how we should live our day-to-day lives in the society that we live in. So now that we've looked at what democracy is, we've looked at the voting process, and we've had a look at what happens if we didn't have democracy, I thought it would be a nice idea to have a think about our immediate community, which of course is our Franklin community, and how we have democracy here. So the thing that came to mind most of all was our school council, and these are the ideas I had. So firstly, we have our elected representatives. So you might remember at the beginning of the year, we all made some speeches if we wanted to run for school council. We all made a speech on why we thought we would be a good school councillor, and also the ideas that we had for the role. And your class listened to those speeches And then based on those speeches, we all made our vote on who we would like. We did that secretly. Nobody told each other who they were voting for. And at the end of the day, your teachers counted up those votes, and whoever got the majority of the votes, just like in a real election, was the person who became school councillor. So they weren't just chosen at random, they were elected. And again, just like our elected representatives, these school councillors listen to our ideas. So they listen to the class and they take back any of those ideas and report them back to Miss Ryan. And this ensures that every pupil at Art Franklin has a say in how the school is run. So we all have a bit of input into the way things happen at Franklin. Now, that's just one idea of how democracy is displayed at Franklin. I wonder now if with you or the adults in your room or with your teachers can now have a discussion on where else you have seen democracy, whether that's in school or out. So thank you very much for your fantastic listening, and I hope to see you all very soon. Have a great rest of the day.